Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Greenberg, and welcome to the Information Systems Security Association Los Angeles Chapter April meeting. I'm your host today, and we're glad that you could join us. Something else to do during the pandemic. Why not? So a little bit about ISSA before we get started on the presentation. We're the founding chapter of the ISSA International. And our goal, of course, is to promote management practices that will assure CIA for everybody. We try that in many different ways, including training and presentations and networking, and hopefully some of that will come back soon. But I'm can't do this alone. We've got a wonderful board of directors that devotes a lot of time and effort to bringing these events to you and to the community. So a shout out to a wonderful team. I'm proud to have them with me on the ISSA board. And why don't you guys who are watching this join us in our community. You can visit ISSA-LA.org, sign up and receive notifications about all the future events that we're having, and you can stay connected with your fellow InfoSec peers. A thank you to our educational sponsors as well, Linux Training Academy, Linux Foundation, Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Wombat, who've set up some discounts for us for if you want to get involved with them. Go visit, and if you're an ISSA member, you will get a discount. You can get those links on our website, and hopefully you can enjoy learning thanks to them. Social media, of course, we have presence on all the major sites, so please do sign up and connect with us, and please post on our company page and Facebook as well. And Meetup is just directing you to our ISSA page, so if you're already getting the connection there, that's not necessary for you, but it's just another place to interact if you'd like. We've got some cool events coming up. Hopefully you can join us for Cinco de Mayo at a little happy hour. We've got a brand new platform that we're going to be trying that'll allow you to move your icon and with your smiley face all around and have some private conversations with people. So come and explore and check that out. You might like it. That'll be May 5th at 5:30, happy hour. It's on our webpage. Sign up in Eventbrite. That way you can get the link. May 6th, we've got a special training for those of you who missed the Vector AI Red Team workshop. Now you can do the Blue Team workshop. You can do that even if you went to the first one. But we've normally this is $150. We've arranged to get you free training. So that's pretty exciting. We're happy we can do that. And on the 19th of May, we have a talk about API governance. I think that's gaining momentum in the field. So if you're not up on API governance, it's a great opportunity to do that. That'll be a lunchtime meeting. So for today's presentation, since you are on YouTube, you can post your questions on app.sli.do and just enter ISSA-LA, and you can do it either anonymously or you can enter your name. And those will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Feel free to ask anything you'd like during the presentation. It'll accumulate in Slido, and then we'll take a look at them. So without further ado, I have the distinct honor to talk to you today about breaches and what a good security leader can do. Just for those of you who don't know me, a little bit about me. I'm the founder of Security Advisors, LLC. I've been honored with the honor roll designation at ISSA International, and I'm also a distinguished fellow there. I did serve as a CISO for 15 years, took my share of blame, of course. As I mentioned earlier, I'm president of the ISSA-LA chapter. I founded the Women in Security Forum, and I am also a former OWASP Global Board of Director. Was elected to that position. A little bit about security advisors. We do IT risk assessments, security gap assessments, application security testing, network pen testing, and whether you want just compliance checkbox or you want a real assessment, we will still do the same level of work and give you ways that you can identify your gaps and close them. So that's it for the business side. Now let's go to this presentation, and hopefully you can walk away with some good things that will help you in the implementation of your security program. So let's set the atmosphere in today's world. Thank goodness, and unfortunately, security is becoming more and more in the news. COVID-19 has clearly helped boost security to the forefront of both boardrooms and in management. How many of you, well, I can't ask for a show of hands, but I assume that everyone's got friends or relatives asking them security questions if you're in this field. The government's even taken it more seriously and is looking to enact legislation on a variety of things. They pushed through some good privacy stuff in California and some other states. But do yourself a favor, don't rely on government for anything related to security other than possibly to get a little funding. But when it comes to controls and regulations and laws, government's always struggling to stay up with the quickly speeding train of security, right? They're always behind. So you're going to have to do this on your own and with your peers. And that's why you're here, right? To learn. So our data unfortunately is leaking all over the place. Every company seems to now be a target because they want to monetize whatever things that you have in your server. And almost every one of you has those valuable assets. Phishing attacks are multiplying. That seems to be a good way in. It's very difficult to stop that. Some statistics for you from the 2020 Poneman Institute. They have identified that it takes 207 days to identify and 73 days to contain a breach on average. So you're talking about 280 days where a malicious hacker has come in, gotten your stuff, and it's almost 3/4 of a year before you even know about it. And the ways that you do find out too often are from an external source, such as the FBI or some other organization that's notified you that your data is out there. Healthcare is even worse, 329 days. And the financial sector is a little bit better. That's 233 days. But still, if you think about how long that takes on average to discover a breach, companies are not resilient. They're not doing a good job of monitoring, to say the least. A malicious attack, that's 315 days. So we're, as opposed to, let's say, errors and omissions, right? The life cycle of a malicious attack from breach to containment, 314 days. And, today the attackers are silent. They want to get in, get your data, get out and destroy their footprints. So the days of website defacement and script kiddies, mainly gone. There's still some of that. There's also a little bit of malicious hacking from organizations that don't like your political stance, but the great majority of the time they want your assets. It's financial or state-sponsored. So bottom line is the times are changing. So how about you, right? As I said, every organization is now a target. You've got, if you're in healthcare, your medical devices are a target and a way into your network. Your cars, if they're connected to any type of network, guess what? The boardroom refrigerator or screen is a target and have been used. There are documented cases. How about business transformation strategy, right? Talk about change. Everyone all of a sudden had to get all their workforce out there remote, and what type of systems is your remote workforce using? What kind of protocols have you put in place to secure your network from all these devices that don't have the same scrutiny as if it was inside your network and a physical device that you've given them? Some companies maybe can afford to hand a laptop to every user, but most companies don't. And so they've got to think about how to secure a remote workforce. How about IoT? That seems to be supplanted from the minds of a lot of professionals because of the remote workforce requirement, but it's still a major issue. You want to make sure you have a good MDM policy in place. And remember, any IoT out of the box is insecure, totally insecure. So make sure that you've got a good assessment plan. This slide is just still mind-boggling to me because vulnerabilities have been known for 10 plus years in many cases, then are still popping up everywhere. A good example is the SQL injection vulnerability that's first appeared in the OWASP top 10 in 2007, but guess what? It's still here. There's no excuse for that. DDoS attacks, seen that rely on the vulnerability in the universal plug and play protocol, those have been known since 2001, and they're still showing up. Patching is still an issue. I've heard so many companies say, forget it, we can't patch everything in a patch cycle. It's impossible. We're too big. It's impossible to do. Well, if you're not going to patch, then you're going to be suffering a breach. It's just a matter of time. Configuration management is not happening. Haphazard construction and building of systems is occurring by different people with different standards and different understanding of what to do, rather than a set image that's been created. Printers and copiers are still being omitted from good security protocols. Bottom line is mission critical information is not being encrypted. And we're so far past due to where we should be and taking security seriously. So, phishing, I mentioned that earlier. Your staff still opens emails from unknown senders. They'll click on the links, they'll save the attachments and open them. The email that says, hey, click here, you've got a $50 gift card, they're still doing it. It's just too compelling, right? And if they're forwarding them to friends and other members in your organization, jokes are everyone needs a joke, especially now. We're sequestered for over a year. So the phishing attacks are making too many inroads into our organizations. So it's really up to you to provide enough security awareness training, but there's also technical controls that you can put in place to make sure that the users don't inadvertently bring something into your network that you don't want or allow something to get out. Some examples of some of the recent breaches, I'm not going to list a lot, but just, we know about SolarWinds, and thanks to our friends in Russia for grabbing data, and people that were hacked include the Homeland Security and State Department and American Nuclear Research Labs. This is getting pretty serious here. A lot of this has been mitigated. We've just learned, I saw an article today, that the Chinese government hackers have compromised dozens of US government agencies, defense contractors. Contractors seem to be a big target, financial institutions and other critical sectors. So this has been happening and will continue to happen. We also are very familiar, unfortunately, with what happened with the Microsoft Exchange servers that are on premise. Chinese government hackers took advantage of untrusted 443 connections. And there's some disagreement as to how many organizations in the US have been affected. I've seen reports of 30,000 to 60,000. The FBI actually took an unprecedented step with this hack because of the impact and potential major problems with a so-called web shell that was placed on so many of these servers. There was a concern that at some later point, these would explode like a time bomb, allow, more things to occur. So the FBI got a warrant and actually went in and was able to kill those shells. And it seemed like the majority were on small and medium-sized businesses, because the larger enterprises will typically have their exchange in the cloud. So, but that's still, that could be devastating, these types of attacks. A company, Premier Diagnostics, had 50,000 customers' medical data breached after storing them on a publicly accessible server. Clearly avoidable. Why do you have medical data on a publicly accessible server? And that's a big issue. Unlike having your financial information accessed, your credit card stolen, trying to fight medical ID theft is such a headache. It could take sometimes years, and it can also be life-threatening if if you have an allergy to some type of antibiotic and you go into the hospital, but then someone steals your medical records and they go in for a procedure and they say, no, I don't have this allergy anymore. Now it's removed from your records. So when you do go in, right, and there have been cases where people have gone in and said, hey, I had the surgery already. No, I didn't. So a lot of problems for that. A company, Polecat, left an unsecured Elasticsearch server exposed. No authentication was required and no encryption was put in place. Guess what? 12 billion records later, or 30 terabytes, they've been breached. So, not good planning. The Health and Welfare Department of West Bengal, India leaked over 8 million COVID-19 test results due to flawed online system implementation. That's where we're at today and more to come, unfortunately. What about the costs of all this stuff? Data breach costs, the global average cost of a data breach is now $3.86 million. And the remote workforce increased that to about 4 on average. Businesses that fully deploy security orchestration and response, however, are down to 245 million on average. So that seems to be doing some of the work that the hype was about. It seems to be helping. Those that haven't deployed any type of security automation, we're talking 6 million now for data breach. And healthcare industry is up to 7.13 million. So a lot of that is about the history of healthcare. They did not typically see themselves as targets, nor did they allocate appropriate spending. They're paying the price now. That's a huge target right on their foreheads. Personally identifiable information is the most frequently compromised type of record and also the costliest at $150 per record. If you've got between 1 and 10 million records and you're breached, you're looking at a cost of about $50 million. And if you have over 50 million records, the average cost is 392 million. So you better have some good practices in place and hope that you've got a good lawyer, good communications expert to talk to the public, and some cyber insurance. We'll talk about that later. What are some of the causes of data breaches? Again, according to the Honeyman Institute study, 52% of breaches are from malicious attacks, 19% are due to stolen or compromised credentials, another 19 misconfigured cloud servers. We've been hearing a lot about that. Those who made AWS servers that made the news because they weren't configured correctly. 16% due to third-party software. 53% were caused by financially motivated attackers, and 13% from nation attackers. So those last two statistics are not cumulative with the others. Those are just another area of concern for us. So we mentioned again, 52% from malicious attack, 23% from human error, and 25% from system glitches. So, clearly it's the criminal element that has the good majority of all of this. And not only are the breaches increasing, but the sophistication are as well, as evident by SolarWinds and Microsoft. And we all know that we're now all targets. So what can we do about this? So here I will be relaying some of my years of experience, and hopefully some of this will stick. Go on tour, right? It's not all about technology. A lot of it is about how you present and communicate in your organization. So take your show on the road. Speak at division meetings, speak at every general staff meeting in your organization. Make sure you have security awareness training for everyone. Don't allow exclusions for executives who feel privileged and say they don't need the training, because we hear that. Don't allow your system admins to say, no, we know what we're doing, we're experts. Make sure that they get it. Don't just do a PowerPoint presentation. Try to gamify it. You pit one division against another, arrange for a security winner of some type who comes up with a great idea or identifies a security control that hasn't been implemented correctly, give them a nice parking space or a gift card, things of that nature, right? And don't forget your own team. Just because they're in security doesn't mean that they are impervious, right? So also meet with the key players in your organization. Here you have to do a little bit of psychology. Find out who are the key stakeholders and decision makers. It doesn't always follow the org chart, right? You can have a person who's been with the company for a while and has the ear of the CEO. That's the person you want to get friendly with. Take some folks out to lunch. Meet regularly with the heads of key areas, all the division heads, legal and compliance. Those are you're going to be your best friends if you're doing your job right. Okay. Clearly, you also have to have a good relationship with the head of system administration. Not always the case, but you have to do your best. And very important, if you want an audience at the C-suite, you've got to learn to talk businessese. And quite often, that amount of time that you have is going to be too short and too infrequent. So you got to make the best of it. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well. Patch management. In my opinion, this is the #1 security control that you want to make sure is addressed in your organization. I mean, you want to have processes in place to ensure that they're patched. You patch everything regularly, that you have a pilot group to test the patch, and that includes your third-party apps. Don't just rely on, if you're using the Microsoft tool, make sure you have everything in there. Try to exclude, to minimize excluding any system, because you will run into cases where a vendor will say, no, you can't patch us as part of your regular patch cycle because we have to get a federal approval for our apps to work right if you're in a, like medical or infrastructure. And they'll be on their different cycle, but so you'll need to take some mitigating steps to have compensating controls in place if you have to exclude any system, because you can't just leave it and hope for the best and close your eyes, right? This is not a good security program. Long term, you're going to want to replace those systems that can't be patched on a regular basis, but do contact the vendor and work with them. Quite often the relationship with the vendor is with a specialty area of your organization or with IT. But as a security leader, don't be afraid to reach out on your own and speak to the highest level person you can get at the vendor's company to try to figure out a strategy to address that. I've had success with that. Doesn't always work, but it's definitely something you need to do if you have any exclusions. Configuration management. We see too often that this is not the place. Not only do you want to build a standard image, but it has to constantly be updated every time a small change or an update is applied. It's got to be tested on a regular basis because things do change. And it has to be on every system, including the admin systems. Admins love to rebuild their own systems on their own, but they need to follow your protocol, need to use the standard image. No deviation can be allowed. If it's in a test area, the test area has to be segmented from the rest of the network, so it's not used as a backdoor. In general, harden all your systems by turning off services that you will not be using. And that can apply pretty much across the board. A change management process is important. You want to form a board that meets regularly. Make sure that that change management board has folks from application security, application development, field support, systems administration, and network management. Because if you don't, then things will happen without you even knowing about them. So any kind of major change needs to have a process and a rollback capability in case it doesn't work. And this board needs to meet regularly. Policies and procedures. Too often we see people confusing policies and procedures and combining them into one document. And what does that do? That makes you less likely to want to change the policy, because in there will be all these procedures, and procedures have to change on a regular basis because your infrastructure changes, vendors, tools change, new hacking capabilities are out there, new malicious hacks are identified. So you have to change your procedure on a regular basis. But if it's in your policy, quite often it's hard to get a policy approved through human resources, through legal, and through the CEO. And it takes lots of signatures and time. Meanwhile, your procedures, you're still out of policy if you're using different procedures. So isolate those, keep them separate, and make sure that you're getting the help with human resources to have everyone sign acceptable use policy. This is important for legal reasons as well as good security practices. Too often, layer 7 is forgotten from conversations that I've had with CISOs, and I have to constantly remind them. We're in my OWASP hat, you've got to bake security into the SDLC. I had a good experience by befriending the head of application development. They're charged with getting stuff done quickly and efficiently. They're not charged with getting things done in a secure fashion. So we've got to make sure that software projects are involved with security from the very get-go. We have to have knowledge of everything that's being developed or about to be developed or considered. So we have to have an understanding of how the developers look towards security. You can befriend a lot of developers because most of them do want to write secure code. They just don't have that knowledge and ability to do so through no fault of their own. The colleges and the universities where they've attended don't have enough security baked into the curriculum. So they're taught, figure this out, get this routine done, use all these libraries, whether they secure or not, doesn't matter. They just need to get them done. But it's our job to advise them and to get them training and to help them understand and get things done in a secure fashion. Some things that you should look towards deploying, and it varies on every organization, which route you take. There's no one best way to do it. There are several. You can utilize SAST or DAST or IAST. SAST is known as white box testing, and it's integrated into the SDLC process. That's done, and that's the static scanning that's done within the development process. They'll check in code and it'll check it for them and help identify areas of potential vulnerability. DAST is black box testing, typically done by the security team, your team, and this will be done from the outside in, and it will identify any potential vulnerabilities, and it's usually the last step prior to deployment. Unless you hire a pen tester, and I strongly recommend that for critical applications. Software composition analysis tools should also be done. These will help identify your insecure libraries, which are the majority of the libraries out there, believe it or not. IS uses software instrumentation, but it also uses agents. So there's a plus and a minus for that. Get the app dev folks trained with security. I help work with the head of application development to find the training that they can have. And please avail yourself of all the tools that OWASP has to use. They're free. They're developed by a highly dedicated bunch of professionals around the globe. And they can help you secure your environment in many different ways. Speaking of your environment, don't forget your physical environment. Yes, we're also responsible for that. You can't just depend on your head of facilities to do things in a secure fashion, because too often we've seen these access cards can be cloned. Too often we've seen cameras hacked and used as a attack vector into your network because the facilities folks were not up on the best practices in security. And how about your data center? I mean, do you know who gets into there? Do you have cameras? Do you have a swipe card? But do you have a log that you can go back and look in case there was any type of incident? And the other point to make today is, can people just pick up a PC and walk out of your building with it without anyone asking questions? So again, procedures, very important. Monitoring is incredibly important, and one of the things that is not being done well in a lot of, actually in most organizations. Can you detect anomalies in your networks? Can you stop that potential breach before it's going to happen? Do you even know that you've been breached already? We've seen from the statistics that I mentioned earlier that the average company is 200 or to 300 days gone before they have any idea that this has happened. You have a SIM device. Are you aggregating your log data from all your infrastructure components? Are you considering or using SOAR? And have you done this in a way that is helping you to reduce the potential for breach and the time it will take to remediate? SOAR has 3 software capabilities: the management of threats and vulnerabilities, responding to security incidents, and automating security operations. Each one of those can dramatically reduce the amount of resources that you need, as well as the time to remediate. And the lack of in-house security expertise will leave you ripe for a breach. So it's important for you to understand that you may need to go out and get an MSSP to help you with both SOC or threat analysis, or gathering all your information and alerting you if you have any kind of situation. So you should be using your creativity to establish reports. When you do vulnerability scanning, you want to make sure that you have your remediation plans. You want to compare these scans to the previous scan, see what you've remediated, what you haven't. Make sure that you rescan after you have those done, but also look for ways to combine the results from a variety of different tools that you have at your disposal. For example, if you look at your patching system and it lists all the systems and all the agents that you have in your organization, but then you run a vulnerability discovery scan, if you identify systems that are not in your anti-malware or patching dashboard, guess what? Then those agents were never properly deployed. You would have had no way of knowing this if not for the discovery scan. So quickly get out there and deploy those agents and patch that. And that's a great way that you can help protect from systems that could be very vulnerable. Access management standards. Can you say definitively to me right now that you know that if anyone who leaves your organization, that you've severed their access to every single app and system that they had access to? There's not only do you have that scope creep in the ability of people to have more and more access to things they no longer need if their job has changed, but also who's tracking all the systems that they have had access to. If you're a supervisor, you sign off on access. If you're a system owner, you will sign off for access. But unless you have a full-blown IAM system, sometimes that can be a bit difficult. You might have to periodically audit systems. You might have to go in and ask system owners to give you a report of all the system, the users in their system, and compare that report with the people that you know are in the organization, and also get the system owners to sign off that yes, these people still need access, and they need access at this particular level. Deploying an identity access management system is very complicated, time consuming, and a lot of organizations are not there yet. Multi-factor authentication, it should be in your systems now across the board. Definitely for every critical system. If not, you're just on borrowed time if you haven't already been breached. But do consider deploying that company-wide. And your admins, this will be probably an ongoing effort on your part. Admins like to log in as admin with admin credentials throughout the day, every day. But they really only need it when they have something to repair. The rest of the time, they should be logged in as a user. So please work with them on that. Did I mention patch? Yes, again, patching would have prevented the Equifax breach. If you are keeping your systems up to date, you're mitigating probably 75% of the risk. Patch systems would have protected against WannaCry ransomware. They would have never made the news. And again, as I'm stating, and I'm reiterating, but I want to drive this point home, it's the most important control that you could put in place, because every time, even the 0 days, once they're identified, the vendors scramble to patch it, throw it out to you to deploy. But if you don't deploy it, then you will be, repeating history. Incident response, that's obviously incredibly important. You want to minimize the damage from anything that's occurred. You want to have an incident response plan, but you also want to be able to test that. A lot of companies are not doing that. Tabletop exercises are fine. Get a representation of people from around the organization and do that. You want to use in threat intelligence feeds in some fashion. You can grab and collate all the information from all your infrastructure devices, but you really need to see what else is out there, or your endpoint tools that you use. The companies that provide them have threat intelligence. There are even threat intelligence platforms now that can aggregate everything that's out there from all different sources. They can remove the duplicates, and they can integrate it into your SIM as well. Some people are speculating these might replace SIMs in the future, because there's no need to put it into the SIM when they get all the information. We'll see. Your incident response team, you need to have attorney, public relations, finance, and the reason you need that is because you also have to rehearse and practice what you're going to say to the public. You have to know what your options are if you have a potential for legal issues. And you want to keep the important stakeholders informed early. A nice statistic from the Ponyman report: companies with an IR team and that also tested that IR team saved $2 million in breach costs. So it pays for itself and more. Encryption, please, it's time. It's time. Encrypt everything that you're storing on your servers, because if they're breached, you want that to be one more layer of protection against someone getting your information. We've all been encrypting in transit for quite some time. Many of us are now encrypting our mission critical data, but the up cost for encrypting everything is not enough to justify not doing it. Some developers like to get fancy and create their own encryption algorithm. Don't do that. You want a proven one that has been rock solid for many years. There's no such thing as something that will never be hacked, but so far AES is still working. It's a government standard. Your key management process should also be looked at. You don't want to store, for example, your keys on the server where the data is. Yes, that's been done. So you have to figure out a way to manage it. I talked about data in transit, but don't use insecure protocols such as Telnet or SSL. We're up to TLS 1.3 now, but 1.2 is still commonly used, and it will give you a certain amount of protection, but don't use TLS 1.1. And there's numbers about how using encryption will help reduce the cost of a breach as well. Disaster recovery plan. Collaborate again, similar to IR. Key business stakeholders have to be consulted. You have to identify acceptable downtime, as well as how long it will take and the amount of data that you are prepared to lose. Because unless you're backing up instantaneously, when you do a restore, the time that from the time it was saved until the time the system went down, there might be some data lost. So you have to work with upper management. The shorter that time, the more money it will cost. You want a cold, warm, or hot site, for example. You have to identify your mission critical systems, make sure that they're prioritized so you know when to start restoring things and in what order. And this has to, of course, be aligned with your business continuity plan. There must be ways to keep the doors open, to keep working until you can get your data back online. Manual systems can be used for a period of time. In most instances, it's not pleasant and it's not pretty, but you got to keep the doors open. You've got to test this plan. We've all heard horror stories of how a system went down, someone went to bring it back, and guess what? The data wasn't there. Things are improving. There are now snapshots, so you're not working with the clunky tapes like in the old days, but some companies still have to do that. But you certainly want to have some way to get a backup offsite, somewhere protected and disconnected to help prevent ransomware attacks. Because if a ransomware hits your company and your backup is connected, then the ransomware might attack your backup and encrypt that as well. So be careful. A lot of companies are looking at potential for backing up to the cloud, something you might want to think about. Oh, don't forget our network, right? Here's the technical stuff. You've got to have a network architecture plan. Don't just start building things and have it morph and evolve. You've got to have an overall plan, all right? And architects are the smartest people I've met. And so you definitely work closely with them. Your firewall performance has to constantly be monitored because that can vary. If you have a flat network, you're asking for trouble. Segment your network, have VLANs, make sure that systems can't talk across that VLAN. There are different ways to incorrectly build VLANs. Make sure you know what you're doing, ask for help. I mentioned earlier, you want a network pen tester. That's something that has to be done at some point periodically. Your risk tolerance will determine how often, but it's better that you're paying someone who you trust to do this rather than the adversary does it to you at the most inconvenient time, of course. And your remote workforce should be secured as well. This has become much more important and in the limelight today. You've got to use VPN or a zero trust model. If by restricting untrusted connections, all those Microsoft Exchange attacks probably wouldn't have happened, right? That proliferated everywhere. So zero trust model is getting more and more traction, something to think about. Network and collaborate. All right. Normally, you would be in person at a meeting with me, and we'd be having drinks, and we'd be talking about the things I said. You'd share your experiences with me, how you solve problems, how you tried to deploy things that worked or didn't work, and it would be a wonderful experience for all of us. These kind of events still allow some of that because there'll be a Q&A session shortly, and you'll be able to ask some questions of me. You want to make new contacts all the time because you can't do this alone, right? The black hat hacker community is billions and billions of dollars in business today. They rival some of the biggest organizations in the world, and they'll sell you tools to help you do the hacking. They'll sell information on how to do things. They'll even give you maintenance. They'll charge you for yearly and monthly maintenance so you can get the upgrades, you get the latest. So it's big business. And there isn't a security officer on the planet who can do this alone. So make new contacts, share the war stories, as I said. There are other options as well. There's organizations like the FBI Cyberwatch and InfraGard, where you can also get key information, notifications. ISSA and OWASP are organizations near and dear to me. Consider joining them in your area. ISACA and CSA and HCCIA are prominent in the Southern California region as well. Go look at them, and there are others out there. You can form your own group if where you happen to live doesn't have anything that's close by. Everything's virtual now, so it's not that important. But when we start meeting in person again, you want to be able to have that in-person connection and that in-person meeting and sharing ideas. And then just go to Meetup, and you'll find hundreds of potential organizations that have been formed through Meetup that'll help you, and you'll be able to go attend at someday in the near future. Let's hope. Keep learning, right? Many of you know about US CERT or MS-ISAC, and there are lots of vendor alerts they'll be happy to share with you. So continue to learn about what's going on, the latest threats to your organization. Your threat landscape is constantly going through changes based on what is happening out there in the cyber criminal world. Continue to watch webcasts. A lot of good bloggers still out there. It's not like it used to be now with social media. Twitter and LinkedIn are much more prevalent. I use them every morning. It's one of the first things I do. And there are great links that have been put on there by people. So I keep up on what's going on a lot through that. But there are still great people out there blogging, giving their opinion or giving the insights on, what was the real story behind a breach, or what a company has been doing, or even tools that you can use to help. There are podcasts. Once you start driving again, those are good things to do, right? Listen to a podcast rather than just music or something in the car. Continue to educate yourself. Life is learning experience. Take some classes. You've learned a lot in your career by now, probably, but there's nothing like continuing that learning experience. Does anyone read books anymore? Yeah, they've got ebooks, and there's a lot of good stuff out there that you can educate yourself on to do that. Do a little give back, not just for the sake of feeling good about helping someone, the next generation of security leaders, but because we need to do this. There's not enough people in our field, and the gap and the need and the number of folks who can do it is widening and will widen dramatically. And one of the ways that we can help, and also help create a more equal group, is by having diversity. So please do that. Support diversity, hire students, train and mentor your staff, go to speak at schools. There's cyber competitions. My fellow board member, Josh, is very involved in that. And he teaches as well. So he's a shining role model for us. But you got to help schools with their curriculums. We have the knowledge. I mentioned that the application development curriculums are weak with security. It's getting better for regular security, but you should build it in to anyone getting an MIS degree. They should have a basic understanding of security and how it works. You can be a guest speaker. I gave a class once at USC. Anybody can do it who has the knowledge. Reach out to teachers and say, hey, I want to be a guest speaker. Or you can just teach part-time if you have a full-time job in the security world, and you'll get a lot of appreciation. So please consider these options for yourself. It's very important. This is the last slide, by the way, so don't worry. Thank you for your patience and sitting through this. Hopefully you gained a lot. But I wanted to say this for last because this is the message. If you're a security leader, this is crucial, okay? You need to be able to talk to upper management, whether you have a board of directors or an owner of a company. You got to talk on their terms because they do not speak security. They don't care if you show them that graph with the number of attacks that you've gotten and that you've fended off due to the tools that you've got. They don't care. You know what they care about? Two things: risk and money. And those are the language, the context of every discussion that you have with them, right? So make sure that you give them the information they need to oversee all the security risks. You have to educate them. And you've also got to match your cybersecurity strategy to your organization's risks, right? Keep the dialogue, as I said, within framework of risk and money. And then I have to talk a little bit about cyber insurance. Some companies still feel, hey, I've got cyber insurance, I'm protected, so I don't have to worry about cyber that much or about security that much. So, we're keeping your budget low. We're paying the money to insurance instead. It doesn't work that way, right? There is a fact that 51% of organizations with cyber insurance use those claims to cover the cost of third-party consulting and legal services, but a couple of gotchas about insurance. Too often, upper management goes and gets the insurance, doesn't give the CISO the form to fill out, and therefore misrepresents the company, saying that they have all these security controls in place, when in reality, they're lacking in several of them. Well, what happens in the case when there's a request for a payoff where you've been hacked? What happens? Well, guess what? The insurance company says, wait a minute, you said you had these things in place, but clearly you don't. So your payout's going to be a big fat zero, right? Sometimes a CISO is forced into a corner where they filled out the form, upper management gets this, and don't say we don't have this. We want to get this insurance at a good rate. CISO, do not compromise what you've put down on that report, because you could blow the whole thing for your company. And if it's upper management's call, it's upper management's call, but it's not your place to falsify information on a report. So these are some gotchas. I want to thank you for your time, but now is the opportunity for you to ask me some questions. You can also reach out for me if you think of it after the fact, info@securityadvisorsllc.com. I'm on Twitter and I'm on LinkedIn as well. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it helpful. Some of the things might be redundant for you, but maybe having everything in one presentation gets you thinking more holistically. And now you can go back and look at your security program and say, you know what, these are a few things I need to fix. So that was my goal today. So I'm going to stop my screen share and see what great questions you might have. So you presented stats from the 2020 Poneman report. Any info on trending from other years? Poneman reports things getting better or worse or staying the same. You could probably guess the answer to that, but I will answer it. Things are getting worse. Costs of breaches are going up. So that's the unfortunate life that we all have to live in today. Any other questions? Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to thank you all for sitting through this. And when you go, while you're in YouTube watching this, you can also see a lot of other great presentations you might have missed in the ISSA YouTube channel. We invite you to do that. And again, we hope to see you in the near future. I'm around once we start being in physical locations. Look forward to it. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll talk soon.